Derrick, good morning. Happy Tuesday, my man. How you doing?
Good morning. I'm doing well. Happy Tuesday. This is a really strong market we've been in almost every day. It's unstoppable.
It is unstoppable, and I'm so glad that that's where you started, because as soon as I learned that you were coming on here today, I was like, I cannot wait to ask him. The last time that we had you on, I think we were around like 583 on the SPY. Let me pull the SPY chart up here. I think we were around like 583 on the SPY, and one of the things that we talked about was that we felt like there was a near-term top here. I actually had that drawn. I didn't have the trend lines fully formed like I do now, but we were basically right at this 582.30 area, and we had popped above it and kind of traded sideways. One of the things that you had said is that you had felt like there are some near-term headwinds, and it might be tough to get over this area. Well, here we are several weeks later. Yes, we're up, but we're really only up like 9 points. So let me ask you, has your view changed? Where are you sitting right now with what you've seen from the market the past couple of weeks?
Sure. So this market has been correcting through time instead of correcting through price. I think when we last spoke,
I love it. Can I copy that and reuse that without offending you? That is awesome.
Please. Okay. So, markets work in periods of expansion and consolidation over time. They work in periods of larger movements and then periods of correction. So it tends to be that when you get a really large movement like we got in the second half of April and the first half of May, that you're then going to need to get some sort of a correction. And I think when you and I last spoke, it was like, all right, this market looks like it might be topping out here a little bit, might run into some resistance. What is that correction going to look like? What is that tightening period going to look like after we've just had this huge expansionary period? And I thought that we could get a little bit more of a price correction than we got, to be honest. Mm-hmm. It's turned into a really strong time correction. And that time corrections are dramatically bullish. You can't look at these technicals right now, especially after yesterday's close, and say that we don't look extremely bullish right now. The other thing that's been really impressive to me is just how incredibly well this market has shrugged off bad news. It doesn't seem to matter what happens. Friday, we had a deterioration in the United States and China with our trade conversation. It looks like things with the U.S. and Europe keep getting a little bit, on edge. And then we had a not so great ISM manufacturing number yesterday. The interesting thing about this is, for example, that China-U.S. headline that came out on Friday, I think if that came out a month ago, it would have led to like a big 3-day pullback in this market. We would have dropped really hard, and then maybe you would have had a buying opportunity. Now those pullbacks are 20 minutes, and we're V-bottoming, and we're coming right back up. And it's interesting because on the one hand, one of my favorite signs in the market is when the market goes up on bad news. Bad news hits, we should go down, but we don't go down. A lot of times that can be a real major signal for the other side. And that's been what we've seen in this time correction. You can't look at these technicals for the S&P or NASDAQ and say they're not bullish. At the same time as all that, I wonder who's left to really buy at this point. Because we know that a lot of the initial positioning squeeze in April and May was coming from systematic funds. It was CTAs, it was vol control, it was risk parity. That then led to a stop in from under positioned hedge funds. We saw a lot of that last week. Last week was like one of the biggest buy weeks for long only funds and hedge funds that we've seen for a long time, because they were dramatically under positioned. And that's how markets work. They work in feedback cycles. Buyers lead to more buying. But now I'm like, all right, the funds got stopped in. The CTAs aren't buying anymore. We still have a little bit of a bid from vol control. We have a bid from corporate buybacks. The technicals look beautiful. I don't want to fight beautiful technicals, but I'm also like, who is really going to be out there now to push this market to the next level? And that's to be determined.
Yeah, and I'm with you there too. Like, I look at the chart here, my eye looks like we want to go higher here, and then I start to maybe back into it. Like, well, what is it that's going to take us higher? Is it going to be any of the? I thought maybe last week we get some blowout number from Nvidia and everything looks great, and we keep. Well, that didn't happen. So what's it this week? Is it going to be Lululemon or CrowdStrike tonight? Probably not. So I'm with you on that. What is the next catalyst that's really going to help us pop higher? It's yet to be seen. I don't know what that is. But it certainly does look pretty good from where we're sitting right now.
This week is really important. If I can just add on to what you're saying, yes. What could bring us higher? So it looks to me like now, again, when you look at how we're not pulling back on a deterioration of any trade headlines. I think that the market's like, we've had enough. I've had enough of talk on EU and China and trade and all this stuff. If it's so bad, let me see it in the numbers. And this week is a hugely important week from an economic data perspective. We had that ISM manufacturing number, not a dramatically important to markets that happened yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
We got jolts. We got the big payroll numbers on Friday. So when you look at this range in the market, which again looks tremendously bullish, do we break up or do we break down out of that? I think a lot of that might be dependent on how these economic numbers look this week.
Okay. And just to be clear, those economic numbers. So we had the ISM yesterday. We've got the jolts here today. Tomorrow, we've got a bunch of Fed speakers and the global composite S&P data. Thursday, the jobless claims. Friday, the non-farm payrolls. I think those are going to be the big ones.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Also, last time we had talked, you had mentioned the whole top-down approach. You were talked about a positioning squeeze, upside headline risk. Where are you at now with your top-down approach?
Sure. So I like to combine technical analysis with what I call market dynamics when I'm studying the market. The technicals to me look tremendously bullish. They really do. The question is, do we break out of this SPY like 593 to 595 resistance zone that we're basically knocking on again this morning? And if we do, I mean, there's no resistance after that. It's basically all-time highs, and then we're at all-time highs. And when you're at all-time highs, there is no resistance, right? So
613.23. That's your one level above that if you don't count 600, the round numbers. So
exactly. So the technicals look dramatically bullish to me, but the market dynamics don't look as bullish to me. So they're definitely not bearish, but they're not like, that was something, and we discussed this, that really propelled this market higher at the end of April and the end of May. It didn't, when you're thinking about like systematic funds that are buying based on rules, they're not buying or selling based on fundamentals. They're not buying or selling based on who the president is or what the tariff policies are. They're not buying or selling based on technical analysis necessarily either. They're buying because the VIX went down, so they're forced to releverage. They're buying because they're just trend following algorithms, and the trend has been higher, so it's feeding on itself into that uptrend. But they only have a limited amount of capital, and they're less supportive. So what needs to propel us higher is real buying, I think, from retail and hedge funds in order to get us to break out and continue.
Yeah. Okay. Really quick question here. Nasir is asking us, sorry, I was trying to line this up here. Nasir is asking, what about the tariff deals? So we got news here that the U.S. wants its proposal, the best proposals by Wednesday, really want to have some deals done by July 8th. Do you think that if we start getting some of these completed deals that are more than just, we're working on them at a rapid pace, if we get some actual completed deals here, do you think that's going to be enough to send us through those all-time highs?
I can't help but wonder if we're hitting the point where it becomes like a buy the rumor, sell the news event, especially if you look at just where the market is compared to where it was at the April low, or where we are now basically compared to all-time highs. We have propelled so much higher on the pauses, the UK deal that got done, the expectation of these other deals. And I do think that the substance of those deals will matter as well. Is 10% a hard floor? And then we kind of established that with the UK, and no one is getting below 10%. Or could we get deals that are lower than that? I think if you saw deals that are lower than that, that will propel the market higher. Or does getting a deal done mean a 35% tariff rate, in which case that could crash us down? So I can't help but wonder with where we're trading if it becomes a buy the rumor, sell the news type of event. But I do think that the substance of the deals themselves matter as well.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And that was perfect too, because that's kind of where I was going. Is this going to be a buy the news, or buy the rumor, sell the news? I had actually read a quote here from Jeremy Siegel earlier. He said, quote, "I remain bullish on equities, presuming the tariffs remain in the 10% for all and 30% for China range." He's basically saying if they stay like that, this up move can continue. If they're more than that, it might be a little bit tough. So, real good stuff there. I want to turn it over to you to see if there's anything new. I have one more question from our last discussion, because it's a discussion that we've actually carried on here when you weren't here. You gave a robo-taxi thesis last time. We've been talking a lot about robo-taxis, Tesla, Waymo, Uber, and all of that. Where are you with all this? Is there one that you like more than others? Are you trading them? Has anything changed? Where are you at with robo-taxis in general?
Sure. So I already said it earlier. One of my favorite signals from the market is when a stock is able to ignore bad news or move higher on bad news. And if we start with Tesla, and then we can look at some of the other players too. Yep. If you start with Tesla, honestly, Tesla short has been one of my best names of the entire calendar year. But I turned bullish on it when I reported that last earnings report, because the earnings report was terrible and the stock went up. And to me, that's like, okay, they crashed this stock all the way down from, where were we, $490 almost, $485, all the way down to $215. Stock got cut by more than in half. And then they come out with a not great earnings report and the stock goes up on it. Then we saw terrible car numbers come out of Portugal, stock went up. We saw terrible car numbers come out of the UK, stock went up. We saw terrible car numbers come out of China, stock went up. And that had just been the theme there that really propelled this thing from like 250 up to these recent highs of 365. Then all of a sudden, at the end of last week, it seems like it changed a little bit. That same thought process. Well, everyone was waiting for Elon to quit Doge so that he could focus on Tesla and focus on his companies again. That had been viewed as a negative, that he was a little bit spread too thin. And then he announces that he's, more or less taking a big step back from Doge, and Tesla didn't propel higher on that. And then yesterday, there was some weak car numbers that got reported, and the stock actually traded lower on that. So now I'm like, okay, it could be that after a $115 rally off those lows, or after the earnings breakout, the narrative starting to change a little bit again, where the stock is now not moving higher on good news. And then,
what about this morning, though? Let me jump in there. What about this morning? We actually got some news here that Tesla sales surged 213% in Norway during May. Stock's up only $1 here today. So
right. So really Tesla's up 0.25% this morning, with the Qs down 0.1. That's a little bit of relative strength, but this is a high beta stock. This is a stock that on positive news catalyst, if the market is flat, this thing should be up 1.5%, which, maybe they rally it after we open, maybe some buyers step in. That's to be seen, but I'm not compelled by this thing being up 0.25% when it finally actually gets some good news that maybe somebody in Europe is buying the vehicles. So the stock doesn't trade as a car company. I think we can all agree on that, right?
I totally agree.
It trades because it's a robo-taxi company, it's a robot company, it's an AI company, it's those things. But those businesses are so early stage for Tesla at this point. It is to be determined whether or not they become the winner. And when I look at the robo-taxi space, I just look at them as behind. In the United States, they're way behind Waymo, which is Google and Uber, basically is the play there. And Google's given a nice technical pullback. It actually looks like it's retesting some support that could be viable potentially right now. And I don't see Tesla, they're not leading abroad either. Tesla's not going to win, I don't think, in robo-taxis in China. They're not winning in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia and the Middle East, like Saudi Arabia has a big stake in Lucent. So they're more incentivized for that to win. If you look at Europe, I think Baidu already has driverless cars being tested in Europe. Someone should fact check me on that. But it's like, all right, awesome. Tesla's getting a few cars rolling out in June. They got a lot of catch up to do. And then I think a big part of it also that's made me bullish on Uber is that I've already got the Uber app on my phone. I've already got the Lyft app, honestly, as well on my phone. Am I really going to download a whole third app just to get a driverless vehicle so I can have it from a Tesla car specifically? Maybe, honestly, maybe. One of the things I do if I'm doing ride hailing is I quickly check Uber and Lyft and see which one's cheaper, and I usually take the one that's cheaper. So if Tesla wants to operate their business at a loss for a long time in order to drive traffic in there because, hey, I can get a Tesla robo-taxi for cheaper than I can get an Uber, okay. But they've got a lot of work to do in order to be able to build that fleet. And then just from a logistics perspective, like, Uber already has everything in place where if someone got drunk on Saturday night and got sick in the back of the car, they've already got all the infrastructure in place to deal with that. I think, and I might have mentioned this last time we spoke, Tesla should buy Lyft if they can afford to do it. I don't know if they can afford to do it, but that's their in. Then they can use all that infrastructure to really accelerate this. But otherwise, it seems to me like they're behind.
Yeah. Okay. So that's interesting. We have people that are on both sides of that. I personally am on the other side. I think Tesla can scale way faster than Waymo can, just by the sheer size of the company. And let me know where I can buy a Waymo, because I know where I can buy a Tesla today. So I'm with you on that. Or I guess I'm on the other side of that. I still want to think that Tesla can really kind of win this race. However, what you threw in there at the end is something that I think that they're going to need, right? The idea of buying Lyft makes so much sense just for the sheer amount of data that they're going to be able to get from a deal like that. So, okay, we'll see how that shakes out. Derrick, really good stuff there. I had so much fun yet again. I forgot to do your read earlier here. Trade with Derrick next week for free in his ProDesk virtual trading floor, June 9th to 13th. QR codes on the screen. Do me a favor and bail me out, folks. Sign up for that and hit that, because the last 2 times Derrick has come on here, I have literally just launched into content and just run right over that. Okay, we did have a question here from a viewer. Derrick, PLTR to 148 this week. What do you think? So I guess I would just, if you can answer his question, great. But more generally, what do you think here with Palantir? This is quickly becoming a cult stock, at least here in this program.
Sure. So there's a measured move here that probably could propel it if it continues up to like 146, just eyeballing the chart on one of my screens. So I actually think that is that what he said, 146?
148, real close.
Okay. So yeah, so into that area, I think makes sense technically. Palantir is an interesting one. I think that the stock is just really, really expensive fundamentally. Yeah. That makes me not want to like own that company in my retirement account or my PA or anything like that. Just at these prices, it's just a little bit too much. I've been watching the stock very closely. There was a very, very big seller around 125 last week. Every time this thing was getting above 125, that seller was jamming the stock back down. And I think if you go back to February when it was first ripping up there, that absolute high was 125. And I think that they did some sort of a secondary offering or some sort of insider selling of stock up there at 125 that really created that resistance zone. So more recently, over the course of the last week, it seemed like every time it was getting above 125, there was a seller jamming this thing down. Then on Friday, on the last day of the month, that was one of the wildest days ever, because Palantir gave like multiple momentum moves that failed all within the same day. And to me, that was like, oh, that seller is still there. They tried to run that thing up. Everyone is seeing, if you watch Palantir, you've seen this stock where in the beginning of the day, the volume comes in, the momentum comes in, and that thing just will explode for like 2, 3, 4, 5 minute bars in a row and just completely rip higher. And it did that Friday morning, but then it broke its opening low and it failed. And then it went again. And then it rolled all the way down and failed. And I was like, wow, we got 2 really big failures in a row on Palantir. That seller is still present. And then into the close, the buy imbalance on that thing, which was probably related to end of week, end of month, stuff like that. The buy imbalance on that was, I don't remember what the number was, but it was like an MOC that was millions of shares to buy. And you can look last Friday, and you can just see how they ripped that thing from $128 to $132 in 10 minutes on the MOC buy. And I was like, wow. And in my head, the question I've been asking myself is that buying real? Like, was this just an end of month thing that propelled that stock higher? Because I see that there's a seller there. I can see it in the tape. I saw him above 125. We saw 2 failures in a row of these momentum moves on Friday. That's not typically how the stock trades, but then it closed so well on that MOC buy. So then yesterday I was watching it really closely. Once again, off the open, tried to explode on that Palantir momentum that we've all seen happen, just to totally fade and then kind of die out throughout the rest of the day. So this is a really, really interesting one to me. If it continues to hold above 130, then I think that you very well may see that 146 measured move price point. If that seller comes in relatively soon, or this market pulls back and it pulls back with it, and the stock gets below 130 relatively soon, then I'm looking at kind of a failed breakout here. Okay. And really, you need to get it back below that 125. That would be my ultimate confirmation that the stock is done in the short term, and it's just going to be punishing those momentum buyers, because those momentum buyers have gotten so used to getting paid in Palantir that they just want to buy those momentum moves. And if all of a sudden they're starting to get consistently punished, then they're not going to be buying in the same way. So know your levels. As of right now, looks great, can continue. You lose 130, especially you lose 125. I would take a big step back from the stock. Don't overtrade it if it's not doing what it had done previously that was paying you.
Okay, amazing. Ryan, I hope that you liked that answer. That was incredible. Ryan followed up and asked if there was a reverse split coming. I tend to think no. Any opinion on that, Derrick? I know that was kind of a throw in there.
I'm more scared of a buyback announcement than a reverse split.
Okay.
I don't know about a reverse split coming. The stock's only at $130. I don't see why they would do that.
Yeah.
If you are trying to be bearish on this thing, or you try to play a failed breakout, I'd be really scared that at a certain point they start to announce a buyback.
Okay. Real good stuff there. A couple of things here, and we'll get you out of here. I appreciate all of the time here. Pete, this is a pretty good comment. We had just talked about Tesla buying Lyft. This is on the other side of that. I agreed with you, but this is on the other side of that. Elon isn't big on acquiring anything when it comes to Tesla. Has a thing about in-house and beating everyone at their own game. I doubt they look to acquire Lyft. This is a personal opinion. He's right on that. The one caveat that I would say here about Lyft is that I could see him wanting to buy the data. That's the way I see it. Anyway, I just wanted to give on the other side of that.
I don't disagree with our listener there at all. With Pete, he tends. I think it'd be a great acquisition. I'm not necessarily saying he's going to do it, but I think it'd be a great acquisition to propel them to success in that business.
Okay, and then I think there was one more thing in here that I was going to ask you about. I don't see it. Oh, yes, it was this. It was the news. So I just wanted to get your reaction here because the news is breaking right now. Alphabet shares trading lower here on an unconfirmed rumor that Apple is reportedly in talks of adding Perplexity to its search for iPhone here. Google trading down by about 1.5% here in the pre-market. You buy this? Well, maybe I should rephrase that. Would you buy Google? Do you believe this at all? Any knee-jerk reaction thoughts here to Google? I understand you couldn't prepare for it.
So I have a very small long position on that I've been suffering as we've been talking. It is very small, so it's not the end of the world. Google. So first of all, I'm a big fan of Perplexity. That's my go-to on AI. That's automatically what I use. Google is by far the cheapest of these Mag 7 stocks, and you could argue that is for a reason. There's a lot of risks out there of them basically losing search to AI, and this is one more headline on it. I think that it's so cheap at this point, though, that it's worth it to own just for the advertising revenue that comes in. And then they've got all these like moonshots that they're working on, whether it's quantum computing or whatever else. And if just one of those moonshots hits at the valuation it currently trades at, the stock could work its way higher. We saw Google get smoked on or Alphabet on May 7th. You can see that on the chart. It was just a nasty, nasty day. And it was a very similar headline. It was Apple moving away from Google as kind of their go-to search provider. And the stock
full disclosure before we go into this any further, I bought this dip and then traded it live here. So okay, great.
Me too. Great. Me too. I also bought that dip. And a big thing that I pay attention to on those news moves is if a stock is ever able to fully retrace the move. So basically, can Google get back above the May 7th high? Now we know a month later it was able to do that. So it's already been hit by bad similar news in the past and it was able to fully negate that. This headline that came out this morning is definitely not good, but I think as cheap as it trades, dips are viable in this stock bigger picture. And then if they become the winner in quantum, which they easily could be, or any of the other stuff that they're working on, this thing could go significantly higher from there. So I like the idea of buying Google dips.
Okay, awesome stuff yet again here from Derrick. Folks, trade with Derrick all next week for free in his ProDesk virtual trading floor, June 9th to June 13th. QR code in the top, link in the description. Derrick, thanks so much for your input here again. Really great seeing you. Have a great rest of your week. We're going to check in with you next time, okay?